Hiya, it's Steve here again from Edible Estates. In this video we're going to start to have a look at what you can still grow in your garden. We're getting to halfway through the year now, and next week the days are going to start to get shorter, and that's going to have an impact on what we can and can't grow. For instance, got some tomatoes that were sown here a few weeks ago. You can see they're really still quite small individual tomato plants. It's very unlikely that you're going to get a very good crop out of these. We've just not got enough time left in the year to grow tomatoes successfully if you're starting them now or have just started them. So we've got to look at other seeds that we can start planting at this time of the year, and which we are still going to get a good crop from. The best thing to start when you're deciding on what seeds you can and can't grow is just have a look at the seed packs. Most seed packs will give you a good guide on the back as to when seeds should be sown. We've got some carrots here, and these are telling us that we can still sow carrot seeds right up to July. Now, bearing in mind that these are UK-wide seed packet producers, they're trying to give general information which will apply throughout the UK. If you sow these seeds right at the end of July in Cornwall, then they may well be successful. Up here in Edinburgh, we probably need to take this with a pinch of salt and say that we can sow these successfully right through to the middle of July. So that's the first point to bear in mind, that you know, the seed packs will give us an indication as to what we can and can't sow. Now, as a general rule of thumb, you know, we know what we can and can't grow this time of year. Carrots, we're just getting to the end. Like I say, these will work from mid-July onwards. There are certain varieties that we wouldn't sow this time of year, but you know, we can select some good carrot seeds that we can sow. There are also things like dwarf French beans, like these, that we can sow. We need to get these in fairly promptly, but as long as we get them in, you know, by early July at the latest, then we should get a crop of good French beans. Beetroots as well. Seen on the seed pack here, it's saying up until July. Again, I think, you know, mid-July, if we get some beetroots in, then we can grow some nice beetroots. And we've also got some sugar snap peas. Again, you know, these are things that if we get in fairly promptly now, we should be good to get some peas out of there. There are also some crops that we're pretty safe to sow right through to the end of August. Lots of salad crops, salad leaves, or things like radishes. Here you can see on the back of the pack here, it's saying that we can sow radishes right up to the end of August, and we should get a good crop of radishes. The main point here is just to remember that you know, some seeds will grow at this time of year, and some seeds, whilst they might germinate, they're not going to end up giving you a good crop. Okay, so let's just have a look at some seeds, and then we'll help you decide on which is the best strategy to use. Really, it comes down to whether the thing that you're going to be growing is something that is grown for their roots, i.e. like carrots or beetroot or parsnips or or radishes, things that grow below the ground, basically they don't really enjoy being disturbed too much. So you would always sow those straight into the place where they're going to grow. So straight into your garden or straight into the pot where they're going to grow. If you're growing something for its leaves, lettuce, cabbage, any of the brassicas, broccoli, kale, anything like that which is growing above the ground, and you're going to be harvesting the leaves, then they do well being started in little pots or in module trays like this. And the advantage to starting them in module trays or in little pots is that we can control the environment a bit better. So for instance, we can take this tray inside where we know it's going to be consistently warm, and the germination will be a lot better than if we sow something outside straight into the ground, where we don't know if a mouse is going to come along and dig up the seed. We don't know if we're going to get a cold night, which is going to chill the soil down a little bit. So there are many advantages to actually starting it in starting your seeds in a tray like this. But like I said, some of the crops don't permit that, so we have to go and sow the seeds directly outside when it comes to the carrots and the root vegetables. There are some crops, for instance beans, peas, which really you can choose which way to go. Either you can sow them directly into the ground outside, or you can start them in the trays. So yeah, another thing that we can probably just about get away with at the moment is maybe sowing some courgette seeds. We won't get a huge crop, but it's still worth giving it a go at this time of year to get the courgettes in the ground. We'll get a nice plant and we'll start harvesting courgettes. Plants that were started earlier in the season are already giving us courgettes now. But yeah, it's still worthwhile giving those a go. We can also plant sow some herb seeds. We've got some parsley here, basil, coriander. Some of you will already have the herb pack, but if you need some more seeds, then let us know, and we can give you some more herb seeds. Let's have a look what else we've got here. We've got some turnips. They're quite a quick growing crop that we're still able to sow at this time of year. Just coming over here, the salad leaves, any things that are grown like this, speedy veg, you'll see here. Salad leaves are only going to take 3-4 weeks from sowing to harvest, so we can still sow plenty of that at this time of year. Spinach is an odd one. Spinach is a relatively quick growing crop, but spinach doesn't like it when it gets too warm, and doesn't like it if it's not getting enough water. So this time of year is not a great time for growing spinach. What you'll normally find is that if you try and grow it this time of year, it will run to seed very, very quickly. So it's quite a tricky customer to deal with at this time of year. It's probably best to wait off until sort of like the second half of August before we start to try to grow spinach again. One last point here, whilst we're looking at the seeds, carrots. Whilst you might have been used to sowing some seeds and seeing the seeds come up within a week or so, carrots are a little bit different. They can take up to 3 weeks to germinate. So there's something not to give up on, to keep watering, Once you've sown them, if you keep the compost moist around them, then they will germinate, but you have to keep that going for 2 to 3 weeks to see them come up. So don't lose heart with them. Okay, so let's go on and have a look at some of the kit that we're going to use. Some of you are going to have access to a garden and are going to want to grow your crops in a garden. That's brilliant, and you know, we can help you out with that. Others will maybe just have access to a patio area, but you can still be growing quite a good range of vegetables out there by utilising pots. Plastic pots like this will give you a really good depth, and that's a really important thing to bear in mind when you're growing a lot of different crops. Just having enough space for the roots to develop. Now that's obvious if you want to grow some carrots. You know, if we tried growing carrots in something like this, then we're just not going to have enough depth. Yeah, you might get away with growing some salad leaves in something like this, but you're not going to be successful when it comes to growing carrots. So a lot of things are going to need a good sort of like at least sort of like 8 to 12 inches of depth to get a successful crop. So you may have access to pots like this. If not, we can supply some of these flexible pots, which again are going to give you a good depth for the roots to develop. Alternatively, of course, you could get creative and start recycling some old plastic containers. Here there's a bird feed container. Again, there's a good sort of like 8 inches there. You can grow a nice range of crops in that. If you are going to be recycling old containers, just make sure you poke some or drill some holes in the bottom for drainage. If you don't do that, obviously the water's just going to sit in there and you'll end up drowning your crops. So for those crops that you want to start inside, you know, those that are going to be grown for their leaves, or which are doing most of their growing above ground, we can start them in modules or in smaller pots. We'll just take the modular trays, fill it up with compost, trying to get rid of any lumps that might still be in the compost. Right, so yeah, now we're ready to sow some seeds in the modular tray. First up, I'll just give it a little tap just to make sure that the compost is settling down, so we don't get any big gaps. Then we're ready to sow our seeds. So I've got some French beans here. As you'll see, they're quite big seeds. And if you remember from what we've said before, you always try and sow your seeds so that the depth of sowing is 2 or 3 times the diameter of the seed. So these are quite big seeds, so they're going to go, they can go halfway down into the compost. So I'm going to put 6 of these seeds in. Now I'm going to take some peas. Oh, let's fish that one out. These are slightly smaller, but again they can go relatively far down into the compost, 2 or 3 times the diameter of that pea seed. So that's 6 of those also. Now I'm also going to do some parsley. Now those seeds are tiny, so these aren't going to go as deep. Just make a slight indentation. The danger with seeds this small is that if they are too deep, they're just not going to have the energy reserves to come up that quickly. So they need to be fairly close to the surface of the compost. There we go. So we'll just lightly cover those over. There we go. Now I'll label these with the date that I've sown them and give them a good water, and then put them aside to germinate. Again, as before with the as you know you've done with the crops previously, just make sure that you're testing the compost every day, just to make sure that they're not drying out, and add water as and when you need it. There we go then. So the seeds are in the compost. As before, you'll just need to label them with the date that the seeds were sown, and water them, and then set them aside and wait for them to germinate. As you're waiting, just make sure that the compost doesn't dry out. So just lightly just touching the top of the compost, looking at it. If it needs water, then give it some water. If it doesn't, leave it be. And then within a week or so, you should see the peas or beans germinating. They'll start poking their heads through, but it's unlikely that you would see parsley coming through. A lot of these things that we're growing germinate at slightly different rates. So things like the peas and the beans, and things that we've done previously, spinach and salad leaves, you should see germinate within a week. Things like parsley and also things that you grow outside like carrots may not germinate for up to 3 weeks. So just be aware of that there are different rates of germination. Okay, so here we are outside, and I just want to point out what I was saying earlier about inconsistent germination. So these are pea plants. And here they would, the peas were sown directly into the soil rather than being transplanted. And because of the hot dry period that we had earlier, not all of the peas have come up. You can see we've only got a few plants here. There will have been a lot more seeds sown. So this shows you how, if we had pea plants, we could just come along and fill in these spaces. And the other benefit of transplanting plants that you've started inside in modules is that you can get them spaced out appropriately. Whereas here, because we didn't have very good germination, we've got these gaps. And we could fill that with other plants, but it just makes it a little bit trickier to look after. So I'm now going to go on and sow some carrot seeds, so we can find a space in the garden where we can grow them. I'm just going to put them in here. So first of all, we'll just loosen the surface of the soil. I'm just going to make a quick drill across the soil, and that is not going to be very deep, bearing in mind that the carrot seeds are really small, so we're not going to plant them too deep. Remember, 2 or 3 times the diameter of the seed. I'm first going to go along and pick out any weeds or debris or rock out of the drill. Anything that's going to make it more difficult for the seeds to germinate. When I'm sowing these seeds, we're trying to remember how big the carrots are going to get. So if you think carrots, when they get to maturity, are going to be about 1 inch across at the top, so we're going to try and leave maybe 2 inches between each seed. I'm going to do that all the way across the drill, so that hopefully we'll have carrots all the way across that line. So yeah, I'm going to continue sowing seeds all the way across this drill, then put in a marker, label it with today's date and what I've sown in there, and then gently cover up the seed. Put it a little tap down. And water that. And again, I can't emphasize this enough, if you are going to grow some carrots, that the seeds are small, they take a long time to germinate, between 2 and 3 weeks. It's important to keep that soil moist over that period, just to get good germination. If it's really close to the surface, that part of the soil is going to dry out really quickly when you get hot, dry days. So it's really important to come out every day or every couple of days, if it's not been raining, and just give that a water. Now, I also want to point out here some spacing. When we're sowing things directly into the soil, or if we're transplanting, we want to make sure that we give our crops enough space to grow. If we get things growing together too closely, then they're just going to be fighting for nutrients and water and light. So we need to make sure that we're giving at least a sort of like 6 to 8 inch gap between different crops. We've got some radishes growing here, some lettuces growing here. When they're quite small, this is fine. As they get closer to maturity, we'll probably have to thin them out a bit to give them even more space, but just getting them germinating, we do it in lines like this, and just, like I say, giving 6 to 8 inches between the lines. With smaller crops like radishes and carrots, you know, they don't need a huge amount of space to grow. But if you're thinking about growing courgettes, then courgette plants are going to end up covering an area of about 1 meter square, and that's you know, you're getting this huge great plant from your seed, and you're not initially, when you're putting that tiny seed in the ground, you're not thinking about how big the mature plant is going to be. But from the courgette seed, you end up with your plant about 1 meter square, and that might get lost initially when you're sowing it, but remember to leave enough space for it to grow to full maturity. Okay, so there was a lot of information there. It takes a wee while to for that information to embed itself. If you've got any questions, please just pop it onto the Facebook group, or alternatively just Google it. You know, if you need information about carrots, just Google how to grow carrots, and you're going to get plenty of hits there and plenty of information. But yeah, also feel free just to put any questions onto the Facebook group.